Hello, everybody. My name is Mahael Abdul-Qawi. I'm the founder and representative of the Accountability Party for Human Rights, a political vanguard organization comprised of individuals who have chosen a path of self-awareness and self-understanding to become something more for themselves, for their loved ones and family, and at larger communities. In this video, I want to talk about what is happening in this nation, the United States of America, as well as across the world, mostly specifically in Europe, and definitely in Australia. And what we have and what I'm talking about is modern day segregation. Modern day segregation that nobody seems to want to call out. It's happening right before our very eyes, and the masses are refusing to call it what it is. If it looks like segregation, if it smells like segregation, if it feels like segregation, then I think what we are living in is modern day segregation. And what I mean by that is I'm talking about these vaccines and how they're being used. The vaccines are being used to prevent people not only from what some would call the luxuries of life, like going to the movies or going to a bar. Those things are fine. Who cares? Yes, if people really are craving those things so much, excuse me, if people are craving those things that much, well then, maybe you should get vaccinated. If those luxuries are important to you, then yes, go ahead. But what I'm talking about are the essential things that really get to the root of why segregation is wrong and why what we're dealing with is segregation. Because when you start to limit the education that people can have, when it starts to affect the voting rights that people have, when it starts to affect the livelihood in terms of where people can go and travel to, these are things that when you look at in the most recent example I can use, and some would get upset that I'm using it, but you have to find the common denominator if you want to find a solution. What happened in the Jim Crow era post-slavery, from the 1860s all the way up to the 1960s, 100 years of segregation. Afro-Americans couldn't eat, couldn't go to certain schools, couldn't ride on the same buses, and if they could, we all know, sat in the back. These are things that were wrong because it wasn't just luxuries. We're talking about things that influence the way people live. Yes, everybody has a choice to how they live, but you cannot restrict the opportunity for them to choose how they live. You as a government, as a society, we all should enforce the idea that everybody has a chance, an opportunity. None of this coulda, shoulda, woulda. If the person chooses not to, that's on them. But we can't take away the fishing pole, the string, the bait, and say, oh, don't fish. It's like, well, we didn't even give them the tools to even consider it, to even be rebellious. Before, in the past, we had the tools where we could still be rebellious and still have an opportunity. Now we live in a time where it's being taken away completely, and how that's being used in its modern sense is being used to a tactic of segregation. Another example nobody will like that I'm comparing it to, but with what happened in the Holocaust. Yes, those are extreme cases, Jim Crow era, Holocaust. But, and this is where people, I need those who are watching and who are doubters, or for those who are agreeing with what I'm saying, who want to spread this along, you have to help these people see those were only violent because those reflected the times. Segregation in the Jim Crow era and the Holocaust, they were extreme physically because the world at the time was a lot more violent than what it is now, just in general. Even crime, even though crime is going up now, like I've covered in a previous video, crime still then was extreme in how it was done because there weren't as many laws. Yes, you can say that we have entered a time in human society where we are more peaceful, even though, again, we have crimes. We are, compared to prior generations, centuries, we are more peaceful. So the way segregation is going to look now, it's not going to be violent like how it was then. The same for if there's going to be a civil war, it's not going to be this complete torn thing and people shooting in the streets and whatnot. It's going to be a very political, it's going to be like, it's going to be a very cold civil war. It's going to be a cold, it's, if it gets physical, it won't be at the extreme that people see it as, even though I know that's the flair and drama, and it's fun to imagine that. And I say fun as in like, it's, gets the dopamine going to think, oh my God, civil war is going to be explosions in countries and cities. No, it's not. It's really not. Maybe there'll be factions, yeah, that will fight, but those will be a small group of people. Again, this is a modern time we live in. The world is not as violent as the mainstream media wants you to think in terms of people act. Yes, they highlight violent actions, but those are extreme cases of where a lot of us could be. But most people are still holding on by a thread of sanity. So in 10 years, maybe, though, it could be this extreme violent society like we used to be in 100 years ago, 200 years ago. But, yeah, it's what we are currently in is segregation. And it's important that people recognize that and call it out, because the masses are so okay with it because it's for the greater health, it's for the greater good. But when people say that, they don't know that they're saying the same spiel that's been said by every side in history that's forced to segregation. That's the same thing that Southerners said. That's the same thing that Hitler and the Nazis said. It's for the greater good. We have to limit what these people can do because it preserves us. We have to limit what the unvaccinated can do because it makes us safe. It makes us feel okay. Take away what the form of segregation is and look at the common denominator, please. It's crucial. People, we have to see this for what it is. And the people who are vaccinated, I'm sorry. If your precious vaccine worked, you would not give a flying fuck if I got sick with COVID or not. Or if your coworker got sick with COVID. If your vaccine actually worked, you would honestly approach it like, why would I care? I got vaccinated. I'm fine. He could go home. If anything, I could do 2 shifts because I'm fine. That's how vaccines should work, as they always done in the past. But the fact is, this shit clearly doesn't work. We have the transformer virus out here, Omicron, showing that it doesn't matter if you're vaccinated. You shouldn't have to get a booster for a vaccine. When, has people forgotten history? Are we so numb in the internet and in the world that we've forgotten history? When in the last 20, 30 years has anybody gotten a booster for a chicken pox, for the influenza, for what the fuck is going on? When did the people become so complacent? Can we just call a fucking spade we all have to come together and call what it is. And these corporations and these politicians are getting away with it, and they know it doesn't work. But they have you feeding into it. They have you pointing fingers. This is not the time to be pointing fingers. We don't need a vaccine to cause separation. We've already been separated enough in the last couple of years, and we're really going to let anybody's in my immune system make me like what? That alone sounds idiotic. And if we're so fearful and so deprived of empathy for the real greater good of common human unity, we're putting ourselves, our own individual safety and pleasure over common sense. Inshallah, we really do need help.